All right, everybody, we're going to get started. So today we have a different model. So we're not having a presentation. We have 3 UC Davis alums working in energy-related fields. Of course, EG is new, so none of them can actually be graduates of this program, right? But I'm going to go around and introduce them, and then they're each going to speak, and then we're going to hopefully have a lot of time for you guys to actually have a discussion. So starting here on my left, Ryan Taylor is currently a consultant with Navigant under the Global Energy Practice, where he specializes in transportation electrification, EENTG program strategy, DER forecasting and data computation, processing and analysis, and I don't know what most of those acronyms mean. So in his spare time, he volunteers for a number of causes ranging from advising rural DER projects in Zambia to serving as the director of the National Society of Black Engineers Energy Special Interest Group, where he builds programs to accelerate competencies and skills for students interested in careers in the energy industry. Ryan comes from humble beginnings, starting his career with Chevron as a contracted employee working on data analysis after graduating high school. He received his BS in chemical physics here at UC Davis and has finance training from UCLA and business training from Harvard Business School. Next to him here is Wayne Leighty. He's a business development manager for hydrogen mobility at Shell, where he develops hydrogen fuel for fuel cell electric vehicles. Wayne grew up in Alaska, surrounded by natural resource industries. Curiosity about the foundation of these endeavors led him to study environmental science and economics at Brown University. And after working as an environmental economics consultant, managing a whitewater rafting company, and serving as chief of staff for an Alaska senator, he attended graduate school here at UC Davis. He earned an MS and PhD in our Transportation Technology and Policy program, an MS in Resource Economics, and an MBA. And prior to his current role, Wayne worked for Shell in the Alaska exploration venture as a commercial regulatory analyst and as business planner, and then as a manager in commercial finance. Lots of roles there. So next we have Carolyn Weiner. She's the manager of energy efficiency portfolio management at Pacific Gas and Electric Company. She currently leads the industrial and agricultural portfolios, which provide approximately $40 million in subsidies and technical assistance to those markets. She has held leadership roles in product management and consulting in the energy sector, as well as other prominent sectors in California. Carolyn received her MBA here at UC Davis. So you see all of them have done different majors and have gotten different degrees here at Davis. So anyway, I'm gonna pass the mic now. We're gonna just go around the table, starting with Ryan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for. I gotta pass it, so I don't want to. Thank you, everyone, for having us here today. My name is Ryan Taylor, as previously mentioned. It's been a little while since I've been to Davis, exactly a year and 4 months since I graduated. It feels like it's been 5 years since I moved to Boston and had to deal with the winters there. It's really, really great to be here. It's very nostalgic, and I'm extremely excited for a number of different reasons to be sitting here with you today and kind of celebrating your program. It's also kind of dual interest because it's a program that I was interested in doing, actually, when I was thinking about my next steps in graduate education, only kind of preceding the Energy Resource Group program at Berkeley, and immediately following a joint master's and MBA program I'm currently considering at MIT. So you're right up in there, right in the mix, and being here today might sway my opinion quite a bit. So I look forward to talking about my experience, and looking forward to talking with my colleagues here about just opportunities in the industry.
Thanks. Yeah, I had to ask what our assignment was. I had forgotten. And I'll be brief also because it's more about talking with you and seeing what your interests are. I'll just color in the lines a little bit about my bio so you have an idea of what discussion you might want to have. I feel like I've arrived. I'm doing now exactly what I wanted to do, and I'm using almost all of that background and training. But it wasn't a direct path. I meandered a bit and did some other things. The postgraduate work has continued the skill building and education in good ways. So that's interesting to talk about how we all, it's not an end point. We don't get a piece of paper and and then we've got all we need and we go out and do it. Everything continues. Some of the experiences in between the lines there are pretty amazing. When I was working in the Alaska venture for Shell, planning a business of that magnitude is pretty hard. We had invested about $2.7 billion in acquiring the leases. By the time we were done with that program, we'd spent about $7 billion, and we had nothing to show for it. So you can ask me why and how, but my net contribution to Shell at that point was negative $7 billion, and I'm slowly digging out from there. We ran a drilling rig on the rocks. We did some other things that were not so good. Commercial finance was interesting, building a set of skills I couldn't have gotten anywhere else. My contribution there was about $100 million, so I'm at negative 6.9 now, building back out. And then, yeah, business development for hydrogen. So it's all the skills of transportation technology and policy combined with the business, combined with the place, California, a place that's dedicated to some of our emission reduction and climate goals and is supporting the industry activity to move it forward. So maybe I'll stop there and look forward to our discussion.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you so much for the invitation to come out and talk to you all. I think most of you some of you I've met already, and some of this might be a little redundant, but I'll try and expand a little bit more. I guess I will follow suit, my illustrious colleagues over here. So I guess a little bit about the sector I'm in. You heard a little bit on kind of the resource side, the consulting side, and now I would say my role and what my team does is part public policy, part operations and strategy, and a small part just dealing with relationships. And so energy efficiency always starts with state policy. The only reason the market exists today is because California policy made it happen. And that starts with the legislature and them setting up laws that enable us to operate in this space. And it ends with various market actors down in the on the ground in the field, working with customers to deliver value to the grid, to public health, and just general longevity in that particular marketplace. So that's kind of at a high level what we do in our line of work. So I work for what's called a program administrator. PG&E obviously has one aspect of their business, their primary business, which is delivering safe, reliable electric and gas resources to our customers. On the other side, we have what's called distributed energy resources, which is the DER you were trying to pronounce. So that's kind of a new area that's up and coming, and that is an integral part of a clean energy future. So if you guys start to dig into California's energy policy and economy, you're going to come across this term, distributed energy resources, and that essentially, we hope everything is lining up to try and make that the future of how we deliver energy resources in the most efficient and cost-effective way while minimizing greenhouse gas emissions. So that's the whole strategy and vision behind it. I will say energy efficiency specifically within that realm is going through a little bit of a identity crisis and transformation. First off, energy efficiency for the last 10 years has been talked about as the most cost-effective resource on the market. If you talk about all the different clean resources you could leverage, with solar dropping so significantly, we now are competing against solar, which we didn't have to before. So it's creating a little bit of a space where we have to really rethink how we're doing energy efficiency, what is the best way to deliver it to the market in the most cost-effective manner. Second to that, not really the legislature, let's just say the Public Utility Commission that really regulates how we offer and push these energy efficiency funds to the market, has opted to push for more outsourcing of all distribution resources, not just energy efficiency. They're kind of this big wave of outsourcing going on, but it has hit energy efficiency. So over the next 3 to 5 years, we will be pushing a lot more of the implementation and design of energy efficiency programs to the market. PG&E will not be in the business of designing and implementing programs anymore. So that is a big cultural and just operational shift for PG&E, as well as the other investor-owned utilities in California. So those are kind of two things that we are struggling with, and I'm happy to dive in a little bit deeper if you guys have specific questions on those. As it relates to my career specifically, I actually started off in consulting. I did management consulting for about 5 years. Decided I hated working for the finance industry, and I thought what they did was worthless, and I wanted to go back to school and do something with a little bit more of a social impact. So I came to Davis for an MBA, really looking more broadly at clean tech. I didn't really know I wanted to do energy efficiency until I heard Ben speak, and he just opened my eyes, and I said, oh, that's exactly what I want to do. And so I got hooked up into the Energy Efficiency Center in the lovely old, I don't even know what building it was. I just remember it took me a couple times to find my way to the room where we were located. And I think by the end of the year, I actually figured out an easier way to get there than the long way I was taking. So I did a lot of work with energy efficiency over my 2 short years of my MBA. And through that, I was able to develop connections in the utility industry, and eventually got a job at PG&E and been there ever since, and started off in an individual contributor role, but now actually is in a leadership role overseeing a portion of our energy efficiency portfolio. So myself and my set of colleagues, all the other managers, we're really focused right now on this transformation, helping to guide our teams through somewhat of a skill set change for them, as well as how do we shape the market and prepare them for something that they wanted, but probably didn't understand exactly what they were asking for. So we'll see how this goes. And I think that's about it for now.
Your academic training, what are the skills that you learned at Davis that were the most important to you hired? What were the skills that were most important to actually be successful?
Do you want to start?
I'll go. That's easy because that's the question that was asked in our little video interview just before. So for me, the MBA opened the door and is what I use every day. My pitch to Ben has been, we need to start a course here that is like going to practice, like basketball or hockey or whatever sport you did. Because by the time you get into the working world, there isn't time to go refer to your notes or maybe take a little time to prepare for it. You're either good at it or you're not. It's a skill, just like throwing a baseball or shooting a basket. And the way you develop a skill is by practicing it. So my plea back to the business school has been, get a little course going that is practice. Have a GoPro camera on your head, and we're going to have an interaction, and we're going to practice direct feedback, or we're going to practice leadership, or we're going to practice these concepts that we learn about to get good at them. And in that course, you're going to be graded on 50%, are you good at it? But just like all your coaches have said, it's also about personal improvement. So 50%, how much are you improving? Yeah? Because at the end of the day, sorry, when you're in the working world, you're either good at it or not, and that's what starts to influence your career. The other thing I said, though, on the video is all that other work is incredible foundation. So, yeah, to go to work for Shell, and in my daily activities, it's most of the MBA skills. But knowing, especially in my job now, all about the technical side of how the vehicles work, all about the systems engineering on energy systems moving into hydrogen. All of the network that we made, especially in California, are sort of foundational for me.
Let me just follow up because I'm going to have something a little bit similar. I would second that, and I would also say time management. And that's one thing. I don't know about the other programs at UC Davis, but for other master's programs, for MBA, they throw you in and they give you 50 different things you need to do, and some of it you can do, some of it you can do really well, some of it you can do partially well, and it's your decision to decide what you want to invest your time to do. And that's the exact same thing when you get out and you're doing, when you're in a leadership role or when you're in any kind of an individual contributor role. There's only so much time you have, and what you put into it is what you make of it, and it's your decision what you find most important. Obviously, your manager will give you some direction on what they think is important, but in general, it's up to you. So the more you get, you're kind of filling up your kind of obligations to help you train your brain on how to switch and how to prioritize what you're doing, the better off you'll be. And so it's one thing I think took my skill set to the next level from my consulting days, but I did a lot more when I was an MBA. I would say the other thing that I wish that master's programs and even undergrad programs would do a little bit more is learning how to network, learning how to present yourself, learning how to feel comfortable talking to people you don't know. Those are things that when you get out, more and more, those are going to be way more important. And I think we did some when I was in the MBA program, but not as much as we should be doing. So the more you either are proactive and kind of training yourself to network and just start to talk to people you don't know and get some information out of it, the better off you'll be, because then you'll just be more confident in doing that in the future.
Yeah, I would add, while I'll be candid here, I'm probably the least qualified to answer the question. While I didn't do my MBA or my master's here, I did have the chance to actually sit in and participate actively in those courses. So there's a course that's taught, at least it was taught by Alumni, where it's kind of open around energy efficiency and topics, and I was probably the only undergrad in that class full of MBAs. There's another course that's taught regularly around net zero energy by Kurt Kornbluth. I was probably the only undergrad out of all the master's students. And I think that underlines the point that's kind of consistent here, which is this is an extremely, extremely resource-heavy university. And that's from my experiences going to other universities, sitting in on those classes, seeing how things go. And so I had the opportunity to do a lot and gain a lot of experience that otherwise wouldn't have been open to me in other institutions. And I think that's paramount in maximizing your experience while you're here. From the professors and from the research that's done here, it's at least clear to me that there's some tie, meaning that all of the individuals that are contributors to the intellectual capital here have some notion of what's going on with each other's research. They might not be fully, fledged experts in it or completely integrating it into their base methodologies, but there's some tie, and I think that makes it a lot easier to be able to look across different expertise areas and look across different groups to see what the tie is and how to apply it to things you might be interested in. And that's like the best skill that I ever got that is immediately relevant to consulting, where the learning curve is always steep.
Oh, right. All right, we'll get it. Give us a few times.
So, Kavia Ritter, I just had a quick question. As far as starting a new position or role when you're fresh out of school or you start that new phase, how was that transition? How did you kind of adjust and get the confidence to excel in those roles? Coming into a new place, new things, kind of like maybe I should just sit back and observe, but then you might feel like something you want to input, and then there's that middle ground. How did you navigate that?
Because I get this question a lot. Okay, sorry, yes, thank you. The question was how to handle, what are kind of best ways to approach starting in a new role, what are ways to get caught up, I assume, and just get comfortable in that role. I think it starts off with your personality, first and foremost. Some folks are much more comfortable watching and observing. Other folks are much more extrovert and love interacting and talking to people. So you might need to sit down and discuss what are you most comfortable doing. I personally am a little bit more on the extrovert side, where when I started my role at PG&E, I just sat down and I started talking to a bunch of people. I set up a bunch of one-on-ones with my, kind of my colleague who was kind of the person I shadowed. He gave me like a laundry list of people who we engage with. So I just went out and started talking to each and every one of them, and as I picked up keywords that they were saying, or they then introduced me to someone else and said, you should talk to this person, they know this, and that comes out of some of the questions you ask them. So then it kind of develops this little chain of events where you get familiar with what's going on, both in terms of cultural dynamics in the company you're working for, but also in the kind of functional area or the broader industry you're working in. So I found that useful, and funny enough, at PG&E, surprise, things are very siloed. So when you start to show that you can make connections between what different teams are doing and how they impact each other, that is, for some reason, very priceless to them, because not a lot of people understand how to do that, and that became kind of the segue for how I got a little bit more able to kind of maneuver around and go up in my career. So it's one thing to note, depending on how large an organization you're going into. The other option is I have a team member on my team right now. He's much more comfortable observing and listening, and he's a very good listener, and he took 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months, listening to various conversations, understanding the personalities in the room, reading people, and using that as a way to help devise what his work was going to be looking like, and who did he need to engage with and develop a relationship with. So that is another model that could be used. It depends on kind of what your comfort level is.
Yeah, I would say be humble and don't be in a rush. You generally have some grace period coming into a new job where people expect that you're going to be learning. So use that, because that time will end. And at some point, people expect that you have learned and you know it and you're delivering. So use that period to really come up to speed. I would say one of the most valuable things you're doing during that period is building that understanding of the network and the ways that people work, because your effectiveness is mostly determined by your ability to work with that organization, not what's in your brain. So make a stakeholder map. There's different forms, but your first priority is figuring out who does what, how do they interact, who talks to whom, who really makes the decisions, where are the problems, making your own kind of landscape. You're going to get a sense for your manager or whoever, how they like to work, run everything through them, or it's okay to go sideways, or figure those things out. I would say it depends on eventually whether you're individual contributor, part of a team, or whether you're leading the team. If I'm leading the team, a couple times now I've found it very effective to then get that information from the rest of the team. So tell me your activities and prioritize them, and tell me which of them you think are unnecessary, you wish you could stop doing, and tell me which of them really should be done by somebody else. So I'm building the same kind of stakeholder map, but for the team. What's going on? I'm stepping in because the previous manager just left to an existing situation. How's it working? And how can we? So I'm learning. I'm being humble, saying I'm not going to make bold visionary statements of ignorance. I'm going to take some time to use my grace period to come up to speed. And then I would say you earn your place through delivery. So you don't need to make these super smart statements in the meeting. You earn that credibility over time through your outstanding delivery. So it's okay to be patient, just earn it instead of showing it.
That's actively applying to my life every day right now. because I'm getting right to the end of my grace period at my firm. But I wanted to just add a little bit more to the idea of the stakeholder map. And I heard this advice from a mentor a long time ago, and it really didn't click until I had a deeper level of maturity as a leader and with understanding myself. This particular mentor mentioned the importance of having sponsors, mentors, and coaches in a company when you start. And that didn't have a lot of relevance to me when I first heard it, but when I got into my most recent firm, it was apparent that a lot of the internal driver for the firm was relational. It's relational. It's all about how you can maintain your relationships, and exactly to the point that was mentioned prior, not so much about what you're capable of, but what do people see that you do, and how does your work manifest in the space you're in. And so having a mentor, sponsor, and a coach, and being able to utilize each one to underscore your skills in particular instances is extremely valuable in that first period of time when you're trying to get an impression across, right? So in just your brief story time, I didn't have a background in consulting before I joined my recent firm. I had a background in oil and gas, right, which is very different structurally and doesn't move as fluidly compared to where I'm at now. So my biggest pain point was adapting to that culture and being able to do a project on 2-week turnaround, right, as opposed to longer engagements with which I'm used to. And fortunate enough for me, I found a mentor, sponsor, and a coach in my performance manager. And so there were conversations that we had readily about areas of improvement, and I was candid about that in terms of where I thought my deficiencies were, where I thought my skills were, and how that positioned me in the firm. And over the course of a year, it was day and night in terms of performance. So I went from, okay, clearly consulting is tough. Maybe you have to think about being in a group that moves at a different pace, right? Not necessarily leaving the firm, but not in the 2-week turnaround group, maybe the longer engagement group, to being the greatest contributor and, not to brag, but recently getting promoted within my group. So it's a huge turnaround, and that just came from identifying those core partners in my professional development. Yeah. So the way that it was explained to me is each one serves a different role. So a mentor, and feel free to correct me because I'm sure I'm not the only one who's heard this. A mentor is really someone who's maybe a step more personal in the sense that they're someone you can have more open conversations with. There's a little bit of informality. It's not disrespectful, but there's a little bit more flex in terms of how you talk about certain things related to your career, your personal life. A sponsor doesn't necessarily have to be someone who has that level of comfort, but they are someone who can speak to your abilities and is kind of a flagpole for where you want to go. So for example, I recently had a conversation with the practice manager over the energy practice. He's a number of steps above me. And the conversation was very candid about my feelings of diversity and what I wanted to contribute in the firm. And so that's someone who's sponsoring or facilitating conversations around my interests. Who's not directly aligned with me. I didn't talk to him about, my struggles in life or anything like that, right? So that's the difference. And then a coach can be someone who's either internal or external to your organization that is invested in that developmental process. So my coach I have a coach in the firm and then I have a coach outside of the firm, and they both give me valuable insight in terms of how to think about my development and whether I'm setting the expectation too high, whether I need to work on soft skills, kind of what to hone in on, what to triangulate in on. Is that helpful? Yeah, I would. This is. Okay, you want to? Yeah.
So I'll just say as a manager, I think it depends on the role you're going into and the level. So if your responsibilities are a little bit more strategic and the impact you're going to provide is probably a multi-year activity, you have a little bit more time because you really what you, in theory, the value I'm going to get out of our relationship is going to be probably higher risk for me, higher risk for yourself, but more impactful for the organization. So there's a little bit more time for you to kind of develop your understanding of the organization and what is going on, and basically designing your plan. Whereas more operational roles that I hire in, they're very operational. So I'm expecting you to deliver pretty quickly within 6 months. I mean, there's some basic things, foundational things you should be able to do pretty quickly. And then some of the broader, once again, more either relationship related or kind of strategic components of the role would develop over time that you're not expected to know right off the bat. But it depends on the role, depends on the level you're coming in at as well. So just stuff to consider. And I'm sorry, the question was, what is the grace period? Define the grace period of entering into a new role, and how long is that period?
So I agree that there isn't. I don't think there is an average, and so I think you can sense it or just ask it when you come into the role to your boss. What's your expectation? You reminded me, stories are better than just generic. So my story, my first job in Shell, I had done the MBA program, but I had 6 months left to finish out the dissertation. So I sort of fell out of the normal cycle with Shell through the MBA. I'd done an internship, and so I had this set of offers that were expiring, and I made a call to Shell saying, hey, I've got to make a choice on these other offers. Are you guys going to make an offer or not? And they said, oh gosh, yeah, give us 24 hours. So they made an offer of you can go work in Colorado or you can go work in Alaska, and here's the offer. Great, I'll go work in Alaska. And I showed up the first day and my boss said, you're a gift employee. I said, I don't know what that is. Well, what's a gift employee? And she said, I was told to hire you. I don't have a purpose for you. I don't know why you're here. They told me to hire you. So my grace period was 0, right? My first challenge was be relevant. Show my boss why she should have me. So I don't think there's a standard kind of thing. You have to just in the role figure out, sense it, but then be explicit with your boss of, okay, what does this transition look like? What's my grace period? How's my learning going to be accelerated? If you want me to contribute into operations next week, cool, then I need to know these things, and let's make it a faster one. So the question is essentially coming back to a comment I made earlier about skill building. How do you do that in an academic institution if that's one of the key things to emerge into the working world with skills that you're good at?
I would just going to start by saying it's more about having ample opportunities to solve problems. And it could be a problem related to a marketing issue. It could be a problem related to, I need to build this component. I was given this just general concept, and they say build a bike a certain way. It's the journey you went through to get to building that bike, and how did you approach solving that problem? What assumptions did you make, and what was the result? And doing that repetitively over and over and over again. So no matter what role you go into, you're always going to have to be solving problems, and you'll train your mind on how to do that. What method works best for you for solving? You're going to ask certain questions of your manager to say, okay, what are my constraints in solving this problem? What's my budget constraint? What's my time constraint? What are other resources I can leverage? And that will help you get to your end point. But that's more of, I would say, what you should be getting out of your experience in your academic career is getting ample opportunity to solve problems.
I just want to add one thing. If those opportunities aren't readily apparent, you can create them, right? So there are a number of organizations whereby which you can volunteer time and solve problem statements that are already predefined. That's a big thing that I do with the National Society of Black Engineers. I joined that organization to solve problems and practically apply skills that I learned in classes, to be candid. So as the director of the Energy Special Interest Group, my whole objective is to dedicate time off the clock to working on skills that are necessary for on the clock, right? So I do project design, and I'm learning actively from mentors about how to scope projects, how to think about projects, both from a contributor level as well as from a facilitator level. So you can create those opportunities for yourself as well.
I've been to a few conferences and because there's keynotes, there's different people speaking. So do you have any strategies for one, as a student, what you should focus on as you go to a conference, and what you focus on as a professional? How do you dedicate your time?
Repeat the question.
So the question was, how do you, both as a student and then as a professional, how do you figure out how to allocate your time at conferences when there's a lot of activity going on and you're trying to discern the value? Is that fair? So for me, on the student end, the main focus was on building connections. So having an understanding that there's a certain level of contribution that I can have to the conference and to the intellectual exchange, and then focusing on that and building connections. So for example, I think the first conference I went to was an American Institute of Chemical Engineers conference, and there were individuals talking about all kinds of research and different topics that I found extremely fascinating, but there wasn't an immediate value add for me to add into the space, right? So I made it a priority to build those connections and then to follow up on relationships over a period of time. So on the student side, at least as an undergrad, that was what I focused on. On the professional side, slightly different. So in the consulting space, and I just got back from a conference Monday, Tuesday in Houston, it's really about, at least for me, being involved in those conversations that are happening on the sidelines. And so, I was at a conference focused on digital oil fields. So how is oil and gas thinking about technology and introduction into the industry and innovation as a broad topic? And it was really, really important to be involved in the conversations that were going on and to both hear and contribute to the development of kind of the formulation around certain ideas. So I actively went to tables where there were companies pitching about different concepts, and I tried to engage them to the level I could about that. Actively involved in conversations about what does blockchain look like in energy broadly, what does it look like in oil and gas, how are the virtual interfaces competing with emerging workforce or aging workforce, right? Those types of conversations have been extremely important in terms of finding out what to get from a conference for me personally.
I didn't do many conferences as a student, so I don't know. But in the professional world, I have a purpose, and then I have create opportunities. So my purpose is to have specific meetings. Often those are side meetings set up prior to the conference, or to introduce some message. I'm on a road show, essentially on some policy proposals we have. So in the last few conferences I go to, I make a place for me to introduce those proposals to the world. Creating opportunity, working for Shell, it's easy. Business development for Shell is easy because people call us. I don't have to go, pound the pavement quite as much. So when I go down to the exhibit hall or something, I am just shotgun. I just go to everyone because I'm curious. What do you do? What's your product? Oh, how does it work? And then I make sure I just state what we need. I'm developing hydrogen refueling stations. The cost needs to be 25% of what it is today. We need to scale it up in a big way. And right now I buy the molecule. And then they say, I have nothing for you. Or they say, oh, that's fascinating. Or at least now people know what I'm looking for. And they go back and think about it.
I don't know if I have much to add. So my experience in conferences in my professional life have been mostly I've had to go and speak at conferences. So I think it's, like they've mentioned, centered around these offline conversations that occur. That tends to be the the focus, and that's really where you get some work done. I think early in your career, if you can, depending on the role you go into, that grace period is a great time to go to conferences and learn about the industry you're going into. So I did a conference, let's see, when I started PG&E, I did a conference like 2 months into my time there, because my focus was in lighting. My sponsor, if you will, said, go to this conference. It's the best conference to just get the cliff notes of the lighting industry in 2 days. And so I went, I took a lot of notes, I met some folks who've been doing my role just in other capacities or other areas. And so once again, another opportunity to just really learn what's being done today in the role I'm moving into, and what can I learn from those folks to be more impactful when I come back. So I think as you move along in your career, it's harder you're playing more of you're giving more to the conference, and I think you'll be taking away as you move forward. But it's great in the first part when you're kind of new to the field or new to your role, I have to say.
Can I make just one side comment? I don't know from your faces how this is going and whether you're daunted or excited or what. I hope you feel excited, because all this stuff starts to happen naturally. Some of it might sound kind of foreign because it's not what you're doing right now, but if I talk to you about writing papers or taking tests or attending classes or whatever, that's very natural to you. All of this stuff becomes very natural very quickly because it's your day in, day out life, just like classes and papers and tests are today. Is it going well? Is this, yeah? Okay. All right, good.
I know you've been waiting.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. So I'm picking up some skepticism from clean tech media, you could say, about oil majors' role in kind of the future of electrified transportation or alternative fuels. So generally speaking, I'm kind of wondering how you think, working at Shell, that incumbent is positioned to compete against potential disruptors. And I think there's a similar question to be answered in other spaces, like auto manufacturers' role as a product company in a world of more mobility services, or utilities' role in a potential world of more distributed energy resources. So none of us can see the future, but how do you think about that competition between incumbents and potential disruptors in your spaces?
The question was, what's the role of incumbents and new companies and disruption in energy space?
Yeah.
So I work for an incumbent. We just had a visit this week from our New Energies leadership team. So Shell has basically said, we're going to create a group called New Energies. We did it a decade ago, and we sort of did it a decade before that, so this isn't new. So we're learning. We tried it, and then, this isn't working for us, an incumbent, so let's back off. We're trying it again. So we're learning how to do it each time. So now we have New Energies. So we have a organizational structure. We know where our investment proposals go, and we know with what they compete at each level. Yeah. So within integrated gas, which is the LNG business essentially, New Energies sits. And then it has wind and solar and energy sources. It has new fuels. Hydrogen is part of that. And it has also a lot of things that you would think of as Silicon Valley kind of startups, connected energies, digital ventures. Are we going to create smartphone apps and things that others do? So generally, we have some assets, capabilities, strengths that others don't have, but we have some processes, rigidity, et cetera, that others don't have. One of the things that we won't do much of is fail early and often. We'll do that internally on projects, but we're not going to start a big business and then fail it, and then start another big business and fail it. So that influences how we interact. And then just perspective. One of the things an incumbent has is the legacy business. That means a lot of cash flow. That means a huge asset base. But that also means that 90,000 employees for Shell around the world. 89,000 of them are managing those assets, creating that cash flow, and 1,000 of them, less than that, are new energies, thinking about the next thing. So we each have a role to play. Let me make it a little bit more tangible. In the hydrogen space, there appears to be an industry. There are a lot of companies, active, cars, things happening. You scratch the surface of that, and it's tenuous because it's grant funded. It's not a viable business. It's small companies developing some things around grants. Shell or Air Liquide is an industrial gas company, or any of the other incumbents who step in. Our primary role in that ecosystem is to commercialize it. So my roadshow is basically to say to the state, success, your grant program has brought us to a point of a nascent industry. If we don't pivot from the existing policies and activity toward commercializing, driving the cost out, driving the scale up, we're not going to make progress. We're going to stay in this sort of nascent phase. So that's our message and our role. If we can pivot to scale and cost reduction, then Shell has 43,000 retail stations around the world and capital, et cetera, and it launches.
For large organizations, similar to what Wayne was saying, you're going to see a similar format. We too have an internal group that's focused on kind of corporate strategy, what's PG&E's long-term play. So same idea, trying to work through how we position ourselves in the new future. We've very recently actually came out and said we were kind of fully committed, all in on creating a clean energy economy for California. And that includes electrification, that includes looking at renewable gases. So we pretty much have kind of put ourselves out there to say this is where we want to go, and every activity internally will be focused on helping us get there. I would say specifically for energy efficiency, we're facing a time that we do have competitors out there wanting to take over administration of programs. The challenge we have is PG&E cannot, we don't really have the ability to position ourselves in a way to basically compete, essentially. So what dictates how we manage programs, who's delivering that funding, is delivered by the Public Utility Commission. And so that creates kind of a different environment, and it's very, I came from, from a competitive industry, so it's a hard shift to move to say, oh, I got to stop. I can't take this problem and go, well, I can figure out how to solve it. I can get around this company that wants to take over our work. We can do it. And step back and say, well, I got to look at what is compliance, what is the commission staff looking for us to do, what is the role of the program administrator, and comply. That's our primary objective. So it's a little bit of a different scenario than what Shell's facing, but definitely has its own flavor, just a little bit of a different problem to solve for.
Yeah, one thing that, it's a really good question, by the way. One thing that we've seen in Navigant is this emerging kind of definition associated with this term called energy as a service, right? And so how do you start thinking about not just incumbents kind of owning all parts of the process in addition to the base business, but are there these third-party individuals that are now coming in and being able to offer services at appreciable rates to customers, right? And most often we've seen this in spaces for building energy management. So it's really easy to just put together a program that you can run through a building or a set of buildings and completely manage multiple factors of that building, right? And it's difficult because there are two models that tend to stand out. It's either the collaborative model, where the incumbents work in some form or fashion with a disruptor, maybe on a small pilot or something that is at the fringe line of the value add for both groups, or there are individuals that start to take up a greater share of the market, right? And you can see this with all kinds of different clean energy startups, all kinds of groups. A very interesting space to look at this in, and it's obviously still emerging with the technology, is energy storage, right? So there's a ton of stuff going on and a ton of disruptors trying to come into the energy storage space because it's a challenging space. So that's just a lot of what we've seen, and it's fascinating stuff.
Can I add one piece of food for thought? And I don't know if you guys have thoughts on it. The word disruptor sounds rather discreet. Sounds like a entity. Amazon buys Whole Foods. Are they a disruptor to grocery stores? Or Uber creates itself. Are they a disruptor to at least taxis, maybe all of transportation? But in the energy world, maybe some disruptors, rather than discrete actors, are market conditions. So wind and solar coming down the cost curve to a point where it disrupts energy efficiency, it maybe disrupts energy storage. I mean, let's just overbuild wind and solar because it's so cheap. Just overbuild it. Don't worry that you're curtailing a large amount of it. Anyway, I don't know in your studies what you think about that, but interesting to think about the relative sort of market trends and relative prices of things as disruption, if not a disruptor. You had a question?
It wasn't really getting this. I want to see if there's any other questions. So a lot of us are in this room because we want to do something with our careers. It's not just creating money value. We want to create social value. I think that's what drew a lot of us to this program. And when I think about what my career is going to be, I'm thinking about how I want to balance, having a good job where I'm creating monetary value, but I'm also creating social value. I want to do something that I find fulfilling. And I was just kind of wondering how you guys found that balance for yourselves, and whether it's created, a need for sacrifice or anything like that.
So the question, if I can repeat for others and summarize, wanting a purpose and fulfillment in your career, and also maybe balancing that against some of the other things you want and need from a career, whether it's income or stability or location or whatever. I would start by saying I would guess the advice or reflection you get from us is unique to us. So I had some good advice as I went through school, and I adopted some of it and I rejected some of it, and that was good. So apply it to your own situation. I also have good debates with a friend who immediately started to make a difference, worked for some incredible nonprofits, and I've been more patient working for a big oil company. So difference of perspective. My perspective, be patient. Be patient. It was really good that I worked on Arctic oil exploration. It was really good that I worked in commercial finance, buying and selling assets, and very transactional kind of work, because those skills are now really helping me do what I think is a very important purpose of developing a zero-emission fuel. I had in mind, through all of that, I knew what I wanted. I don't want to help the world have more oil. I want the world to transition efficiently and effectively to cleaner and new energy forms. But it was good for me to be patient, to get myself in the right place, develop the power and influence and skills, and then there was a moment a year ago when, aha, I can use that. I've built a big lever and I'm going to yank on it.
I'm trying to figure out how to answer this question. I would say, I guess personally, when I was one objective I had coming out of the MBA program, because I had spent so much, at least I felt, was so much time in consulting. I knew one thing I wanted to do was I wanted to go in-house. I needed kind of a break from the chaos that is consulting and the constant kind of moving around. You have to switch what you're switching industries all the time, so you don't even have enough time to like really get to know an industry. It's almost like a relationship and go, oh, now I really understand what goes on in finance and these products. Oh, tomorrow you're going to consumer electronics. So I just needed time to be able to feel like I can build some deep understanding in a specific company and industry. And so, like I said, as I kind of progressed and said, okay, no, I really want to do energy efficiency, and it was very obvious, the utilities was kind of where you would want to start because they had the most experience and, most money to inject into this space, the most resources. So that kind of focused me into the utility industry. Coming in, and it was kind of everything I kind of expected and a little bit more. It's still chaotic. It's just a different kind of chaos. But it's allowed me to really develop a very deep knowledge of energy efficiency. And although I've only been in the industry for 7 or 8 years now, I'm surrounded by people who've been in it for 30 years. So you hear them talk about, they started off just doing audits and homes, and we've come such a long way from doing that, but to hear them start there and kind of go ground up and get where they're at, it's just helpful learning experience to understand what could be possible and where this industry might be going. I also, because I have 2 children, so I was already planning on starting a family pretty soon out of business school, so that was another aspect I had to factor in. And I know in the energy efficiency industry, you're kind of either going consulting or some sort of service industry, or you're doing program administration at a utility. So you're kind of, if I wanted to have a stable work-life balance, it was going to have to be a utility. I had to figure out how to get my way into utility. So that was another kind of driving factor that I need to build in. And now the drawback is, Ryan experienced the opposite of what I experienced, where I went in and I was given tasks of PG&E, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, we got to turn this around tomorrow. We got to go. And everyone's like, wait a minute, I got a 1-month vacation coming up. I don't know what you're talking about. We're not going to do that for another 2 months. And I'm going, wait, but what happens if we don't get it done? So I had to slow my pace down and recognize that the world wasn't going to fall apart if we didn't deliver it tomorrow. So I had to kind of learn how to, navigate that different style than what I was used to. But that's from, So I think but you create other, I need to have a lot going on in my kind of professional life to make it worthwhile. So I just continue to build off of that, take on other projects, other things, just to keep me constantly learning, constantly improving, and go from there. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of another perspective.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add except just a brief anecdote. There's a very good comment that a good friend of mine told me that didn't click until well after they said it, which was make understanding yourself a study, right? In the same way that you're doing your study in your focus area, really be intentional about trying to understand what your drivers are, what your motivators are, what things you're not willing to do, what sacrifices you're willing to make. And for me, doing that consistently over a period of time really helped to define what I feel like is my career. And I'm still pretty early in consulting, but I say this all the time, I love my job. It is literally a dream job. I get to work on, and it's a little bit different in my firm because we're not spread out amongst a bunch of different industries. We're pretty concentrated on energy. But I love my job. I love working on projects. I love the people I work with. And I'm convinced that that happened after years of being intentional and trying to hone in on what exactly I wanted to do and where I wanted to add value. So that would be my piece of advice.
More personal question, but kind of related, but in retrospect, would you have done anything differently in terms of your academic
Go for it.
So the question is, what academically, specifically, what would have, or more personally, what might we have done differently in the course of, go ahead.
Yeah,
If anything at all. There's definitely a ton of stuff I would have done differently, just as a disclaimer. I think it's a challenging question to answer, right? Because I don't have regrets about my pathway, but that doesn't mean it couldn't have been more optimized. So for me, I think it would have been probably the greatest difference in my experience that I think I would have gained would have been from trying to overcome my own insecurities about learning a little bit earlier. Right, so there's a lot of, and we're in a very intellectual space. UC Davis is a top university for a reason, but it's still okay to say, I don't know. Right, there, and having the right perspective on intellectual curiosity, especially at the graduate level, I would say that's more of a sentiment from a lot of friends of mine that were either doing their master's or PhD than at the undergrad, because you're given more leeway. But having that intellectual curiosity and really getting out there and saying things you want to learn and being frank about what you don't know, I think that would have changed my experience quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't have I have one thing to say on the question. In general, time flows forward. I would say it's very good advice to you're not going to know exactly who you are and what you want today, and it's probably going to change over time. So really good advice to continually study yourself. Accumulating experience is what you're doing always. So do that. Accumulate experience. In retrospect, if I were to do one thing differently, I should have, and it's sort of too late in my life to do it, run some heavy machinery. Right? Go out and use a backhoe and do some welding, because that's the foundation of all this stuff. I mean, unless you're really on some kind of digital system coding end of it, energy's stealing the ground.
Let's see. I guess similarly, I don't have a ton of regrets, and you would hope you wouldn't have a ton of regrets, because I'm still going, so hopefully I would have pivoted if I had started to regret where I was headed. I guess it would kind of second what Ryan was saying, is just making sure you, kind of on the same lines, I would just make sure you don't fall into areas you're comfortable with, and use, especially on that, your time in academia, use the opportunity to try out things you never tried before, or maybe you don't know at all and you're nervous about that, and it's okay to fail a little bit to get to learn something new, learn something about yourself. Because I don't think I guess I didn't have I only had 2 years, so there's only so much I could do in 2 years. But I think for both my undergrad and graduate, I would have, I probably should have stopped and said, okay, what are other things I should take advantage of while I'm here? What are other classes I would have never thought of taking that are kind of outside my comfort area? And I probably should have done that just to kind of round out what I was doing. But I was very focused on a little too focused on where I wanted to go in the next year. So make sure you stop and think about, okay, I'm here now, and I don't know if I'm coming back. What can I do right now to enjoy this time?
Sorry, can I add, you got one more? One more on this topic, because it might not come in later. Don't be afraid of the mundane. So I remember we had a management of innovation course, Sandy Hargan on, and the first assignment is go make an innovation. We're going to meet again tomorrow, so go one pager, write down your innovation. And we all came back with the coolest smartphone app. And he said, you guys have totally missed the point. You went straight to the most competitive place, everyone's writing smartphone apps, with the least impact. Even the greatest smartphone app is, right? Go to some big system and make a 0.1% improvement, and man, you've got gold.
Just to piggyback off of that, just everyone here, and I'm not going to, if you don't know, I won't be mad, but Mark Modera, right? Sound familiar? He innovated in a space that is classically unsexy, right? Classically, HVAC. Right? So just as a pitch, go talk to Mark Modera about mundane and where the opportunity really is. His innovation is phenomenal in that space, and he's well known for it now.
Sorry.
I think it's a personal opinion. So I'm more a practical learner. I have challenges learning when I'm in a classroom and taking like theories. I just look at theories and going, what the hell is this? And what does this mean? How can I even apply this? I'm very much more comfortable learning on the ground and, taking a project and just running with it and figuring out where it takes me. So I guess that's where I was headed, was that for me, I probably would have spent more time trying to look at what are really diving more deeply into the theory part of it and kind of getting out of my comfort zone and seeing what I can pull a little bit more from there. But that, once again, that's just me and how I typically learn, and part of it is part of me wanted to come back to school to do that, and then I got here and I got sucked into I tended to go directly into doing consulting projects and things where I could get out and start to kind of work with a company or some sort of individual. So I still got sucked into something I was more used to doing, even though I purposely tried to go back to school and do something different. I still did my classwork. I still, obviously was engaged. I did projects, class projects. I did a lot of reading, everything I was kind of supposed to do. But I didn't spend the time, I think, personally to really sit down and have conversations about what we're talking about in this book we're reading or this concept we're learning. And I probably should have done that a little bit more.
I think it's about toolkit, skills, and heuristics. And I think the importance of those changes over time. So toolkit, whatever you're going to be, you're an engineer, you need a good kind of go-to thermodynamic model. Your first 2 years you're going to be using that. Or you need a good problem statement, the basic McKinsey 10 slide deck. Because that's what you sell your clients is, hey, I have a tool, and I jam your problem into my tool over and over again, yeah? Or whatever. So you're developing your toolkit, and in the first few years you're going to use that because it's good, and it's a nice, warm, safe place when you get this new problem, and you're like, oh, man, I don't know, but I have a toolkit. Skills is what I've already sort of pitched. Eventually, at some point, it's less about using the toolkit, and it's more about you're really good at organizational dynamics or leading a team or these kinds of mostly, I would say, interpersonal skills. And then my reflection now, sort of 7 years out, is the things that have stuck with me for 7 years are these anecdotes, are these heuristics of, oh yeah, I still remember the CEO of Mattel coming in and telling us that story about magnets and how they did so many years of testing on magnets to make sure that they are safe. And then they come out with a product, and sure enough, if you eat one magnet and then you wait just the right amount of time and you eat a second magnet, they glue your intestine together, and a little boy died. And they said, this is why we also have really robust systems of product recall, and we're really proactive about these things. Anyway, so story stuck with me. So 7 years out, then it becomes these heuristics, these stories, these kind of, I didn't know why that story was so important when he told it, but now having worked for 7 years in the oil and gas industry, I understand why that story, which illustrates an approach, is really valuable. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I love this question. Because it's a lot more. Sorry, I got excited. So what are the tools that are most helpful in the job search, whether it's LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever? I'm extremely low effort because I am a procrastinator, so that means that I have to be more efficient to compensate. And by that, I mean all I do is very straightforward. I go on LinkedIn. I make a point to look at individuals in the industry or in the focus area that I'm interested in. Maybe not even, I haven't even triangulated on, that's exactly what I want to do, but if I have a notion, I'll look them up, I'll message them and say, do you have 15 minutes to talk? And I will tell you, 95% of the time I've gotten a response and I've had a conversation. And so in my personal progression of career, having those touch points and those conversations has been more valuable than anything. Being able to talk real time with the person and say, this is what I'm thinking about, this is where I'm at, let me know if this is reasonable or not. You'll find people are extremely helpful with very little investment or very little acquaintanceship. Like they may not know you, but they're still invested in helping you. So all of my major milestones, even up to getting the job I currently have, is from sending a message and asking for 15 minutes to talk.
And you can tell that works for Ryan because he's articulate and charismatic. So those conversations go really well, I bet. Yeah.
It's personal.
I'm not a good person to answer. I've been working for the same company for 7 years. But as I came out of school, it was the Career Center through the business school that was most helpful to me because I was trying to get into industry and was hitting against the brick wall. So even if you're not in the business school, go talk to the Career Center and say, please help me with some of your resources or connections or whatever. No offense to professors, but to me, not helpful, right? Because they didn't have the right network that I was trying to tap into. That's right. Academic jobs, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then I would make one link, although it's not exactly your question, back to the whole coach, mentor, sponsor. This is the role of sponsors in some way. You build this credibility, trust with them, and then they help pull you. My experience, although you didn't ask it, in Shell is you really want a good sponsor who's only a few steps ahead of you. I had some great sponsors out of the Alaska venture where we had some very senior executive vice presidents working problems because our problems were so big. They were outstanding sponsors for about 2 years and then they retired. Right? So they were too good of a sponsor because they were too far up and then they were gone.
Before I answer, how many of you went straight from undergrad to this program, if I understand how this program operates? Okay, so your first mission out of this program is to go into consulting. You will learn everything you need to know about relationship development and management, communication skills, once again, managing time, doing critical thinking. Those are things that generally you'll want, and from consulting, you pretty much can go anywhere. And through consulting, you also will develop a network of individuals that you can potentially lean on once you're ready to make a move somewhere else. So it's one suggestion. And to get into consulting, I was lucky. I kind of went in via kind of a contract role, and then I got hired on full time. So I just was using kind of the job search networks. There's usually generally different roles going on in consulting, but you can also rely on academic resources as well to help you get into that. But I think in terms of a place to start, if you've never done something, consulting is a good way to get your feet wet. I think the only other piece of feedback I would give on job search is various opportunities will present themselves in different manners as you progress forward in your career, and just don't hesitate to take on those opportunities, even if you feel like you're maybe not ready for it, or you're not totally sure if you feel like you're super qualified for it. It doesn't hurt to put yourself out there, and you may be surprised about kind of the reputation you've developed over time in the company you're in. So don't hesitate to try, and at least you get some practice in interviewing, practice in engaging in conversations with various folks in leadership positions. So it's another thing to think about. I know for me, I would say it's not, don't always assume, I know it's tough to think about this, but don't always assume just applying for a role on a website means you won't get it. What's really important if you just do kind of a cold application is to really make sure your resume clearly lines directly up to the job description. You absolutely hit every minimum requirement laid out in that requisite, and you're using keywords in your resume to line it up to that job description. The more you sync them up so they're almost exactly, that is kind of your foot in the door to at least have a conversation, and then the rest goes from there. So just think about that. But I get a lot of resumes, just people applying online, and I bring them in, and as long as they, really the first step is they meet minimum requirements, and next step is we look at how relevant they are for the company. Yeah.
Sorry, can I just one thing quickly, reinforcing the point of consulting and broadening it a little bit. Something where you are going to work your tail off, because life is only going to get richer, whether it's a family or serving on boards or whatever. Now's the time to get something where you go and you have that sort of individual ability to work your tail off, and then something that's giving you broad exposure to future employers. So investment banking, it's not just consulting, I think, that would enable that kind of breadth of exposure. Sorry, I wanted to get that in. Sorry.